After months of whispers and speculation, Sweet Tea finally decided to speak her truth about her time on Married to Medicine. What she revealed was far more shocking than anyone could have anticipated. Her story wasn't just about petty drama, it exposed the dark underbelly of reality television that viewers rarely get to see. When Sweet Tea joined the show as Dr. Gregory Lundsford's new wife, she stepped into a tight-knit group with established friendships and alliances. From day one, she faced cold shoulders and skeptical glances instead of warm welcomes. The tension was palpable, especially with Quad Webb in the mix. Quad made no effort to hide her disdain for Sweet Tea, creating an uncomfortable atmosphere whenever they were together. Initially, Sweet Tea thought she'd found an ally in Dr.Mimi. She seemed genuinely supportive, offering advice and defending Sweet Tea when others threw shade. For someone navigating the treacherous waters of joining an established friend group, Mimi's support felt like a lifeline. Sweet Tea trusted her completely, believing their connection was authentic. But cracks began to appear in this seemingly solid friendship. Sweet Tea noticed subtle shifts in Mimi's behavior. She'd be supportive in private conversations, but would switch up her attitude when cameras were rolling or when other cast members were around. The real eye-opener came when Sweet Tea watched Mimi's solo interviews on the show, where she claimed Sweet Tea was too emotional and not strong enough for the group dynamic. These revelations cut deep. Sweet Tea watched as Mimi gradually distanced herself, leaving her feeling isolated and questioning if their friendship had ever been real. The betrayal pushed Sweet Tea to a breaking point, and she decided to expose everything on social media, holding nothing back. In her tell-all posts, Sweet Tea revealed something that changed everything. She claimed their friendship was manufactured for the show. According to her, cast members were selected and instructed to bring certain people along to create predetermined storylines. This bombshell made Sweet Tea question everything she thought she knew about her reality TV experience. What she once believed were authentic relationships now seemed like carefully crafted narratives designed to generate viewer engagement. Sweet Tea felt used, not just by Mimi, but by the entire production. She wasn't part of a friend group, she was a character in someone else's story. This revelation sparked widespread discussion among fans. Were any of the friendships on the show genuine? Was everything just performance art masquerading as reality? Sweet Tea's courage to speak out forced viewers to question the authenticity of everything they'd been watching. The more Sweet Tea shared, the deeper the deception appeared to go. What hurt most wasn't just Mimi's betrayal, but the realization that what she thought was genuine support was merely a plot device for the show's dramatic arc. Yet, as devastating as these revelations were, they only scratched the surface of what Sweet Tea would ultimately expose. Sweet Tea didn't stop with exposing Mimi's fake friendship. She took things further by alleging something far more disturbing. Mimi wasn't just pretending to be her friend. She was actively participating in a coordinated effort to portray Sweet Tea as unstable on national television. According to Sweet Tea, producers and certain cast members, including Dr.Mimi, were collaborating behind the scenes to craft a narrative that would make her appear mentally unstable. She claimed they had even planned fake therapy sessions in Mimi's office, designed to bait Sweet Tea into emotional vulnerability that could be exploited and edited to make her look unhinged. The alleged plan was to capture Sweet Tea's breakdowns on camera for ratings, using her real pain as entertainment fodder. If true, this wasn't just reality TV drama. It was a calculated form of emotional manipulation that crossed serious ethical lines. These accusations transformed Sweet Tea's story from standard reality show beef into something much more concerning. It highlighted the potentially exploitative nature of reality television production and the psychological toll it can take on participants who believe they're simply sharing their lives. When Sweet Tea shared these allegations, fan reaction was immediate and intense. Social media exploded with support for her, with many viewers condemning Dr.Mimi and questioning the ethics of the production team. Some fans suggested Sweet Tea had walked straight into a trap, only now understanding the full scope of the manipulation. The conversation quickly expanded beyond just Dr.Mimi to include the producers and their role in manufacturing drama. Viewers began questioning everything they saw on screen. Was Sweet Tea deliberately targeted from the beginning? Was the entire season storyline pre-planned regardless of what actually happened in these women's lives? As Sweet Tea continued speaking out, she started noticing another disturbing pattern. It wasn't just Mimi. The entire cast seemed to be turning against her one by one. Each woman was picking sides, and not surprisingly, the loudest voice opposing Sweet Tea was Quad Webb. Quad's animosity made sense on some level. She had previously been married to Dr. Gregory before Sweet Tea came into the picture. Seeing someone new in what was once her position clearly triggered something in Quad. The tension reached a boiling point when Quad delivered an ultimatum to the group. If Sweet Tea stays, I'm leaving. This forced everyone to choose sides, and that's when Sweet Tea witnessed something truly heartbreaking. Dr.Mimi, who had once seemed like her only ally, began gravitating toward the original ladies, particularly Quad. The shift wasn't subtle. Fans could see Mimi distancing herself from Sweet Tea with each episode. This betrayal left Sweet Tea isolated and confused. She had genuinely trusted Mimi, believing their connection transcended the show's drama. Now it appeared that Mimi valued her position within the established hierarchy more than standing by someone who considered her a friend. Sweet Tea began to understand that reality television wasn't just about sharing your life, it was about power dynamics, alliances, and maintaining your relevance. Mimi had chosen the safer route by aligning with the veteran cast members, leaving Sweet Tea to fend for herself. The veteran cast members didn't stop at isolating Sweet Tea socially. They began pushing a narrative that she was too emotional, too unstable, too different from the rest of them. Sweet Tea found herself cast not just as the newcomer, but as the unwelcome outsider who didn't belong in their circle. Despite this coordinated campaign against her, Sweet Tea refused to back down. Having already recognized the false nature of her supposed friendships, she now saw clearly how the group dynamics operated. She wasn't just fighting individual cast members anymore. She was battling an entire system designed to keep her on the outside. As pressure mounted, viewers sensed something dramatic was brewing. Would Sweet Tea continue fighting against these odds, or would she decide the emotional cost was too high? The tension built with each social media post and each new episode. Just when fans thought they'd heard everything, Sweet Tea dropped yet another bombshell. She expanded her accusations beyond the cast to include the production team directly. According to Sweet Tea, producers weren't just capturing the natural drama, they were actively creating it. She claimed producers were guiding cast members on how to interact with her, selectively editing footage to portray her in the worst light possible, and deliberately manufacturing situations designed to trigger emotional responses from her. Sweet Tea alleged that what viewers saw wasn't reality, but a carefully constructed narrative designed to cast her as the villain. "This is how these shows work," she explained in a candid social media post. "They show the audience what they want, not what really happened." She described how her authentic reactions were being cut and edited to make her appear irrational, while others were portrayed sympathetically regardless of their actual behavior. Fed up with this treatment, Sweet Tea made a bold decision. Rather than allowing the show to control her narrative, she would use social media as her platform to tell her unfiltered truth. She refused to let producers distort her character for ratings, and she wasn't going to remain silent while her reputation was being damaged. Imagine joining a show thinking you'd be sharing your authentic journey, only to discover that everything, the friendships, the conflicts, even your own portrayal, was being manipulated behind the scenes to create maximum drama, regardless of the emotional toll it took on you. This was Sweet Tea's reality, and she was finally letting viewers see behind the curtain. Fan reaction was divided but passionate. Many rallied behind Sweet Tea, applauding her courage for exposing the show's manipulative practices and standing her ground against unfair treatment. Others were skeptical, wondering if there was more to the story than what Sweet Tea was sharing. But one thing was undeniable: people were talking, and the conversation about reality TV ethics was front and center. Sweet Tea wasn't just exposing individual incidents anymore, she was challenging the entire reality TV ecosystem. She claimed producers were actively directing cast members to behave in specific ways, engineering conflicts and fabricating storylines that had little connection to reality. According to her, the show wasn't documenting real life, it was creating artificial drama with real consequences for the people involved. The emotional toll became increasingly apparent as Sweet Tea continued sharing her experiences. She realized she wasn't just battling her co-stars, she was fighting against an entire production machine that prioritized viewership over the well-being of its cast members. What started as excitement about joining a popular show had transformed into a nightmare of manipulation and isolation. But something remarkable happened as Sweet Tea opened up about these experiences. Instead of breaking down, she found her voice. She stopped blaming herself for the tensions on the show and recognized the larger forces at work. What viewers witnessed wasn't just someone complaining about bad treatment, it was a woman reclaiming her narrative and refusing to be defined by how others portrayed her. As her revelations gained traction, Sweet Tea noticed another disturbing pattern emerging. Cast members who had once pretended to support her were now distancing themselves completely. The more she spoke her truth, the more isolated she became. This confirmed what she had begun to suspect. Nobody on the show had ever truly been in her corner. Rather than being discouraged, Sweet Tea became more determined. She continued sharing her experiences, refusing to let anyone silence her. By taking control of her own story and exposing the manipulation behind the scenes, she was reclaiming power that had been taken from her throughout her time on the show. Fans started to view Sweet Tea in a new light as they understood the extent of the manipulation she'd endured. She wasn't just calling out a few cast members for petty behavior, she was exposing systematic issues with how reality shows operate, prioritizing drama over authenticity and viewership over cast welfare. Sweet Tea became something of a whistleblower, pulling back the curtain on practices many suspected but few insiders were willing to confirm. Despite her growing support among viewers, one question lingered. Was Sweet Tea truly an innocent victim, or had she simply become another player in this complex game of reality TV chess? The more she revealed, the more complex the situation appeared. With both producers and co-stars exposed, tensions reached an unprecedented high. Everyone was watching to see what would happen next. Would Sweet Tea continue fighting for her place on the show, or was this the perfect moment to walk away from the toxicity? The decision wasn't simple. Reality television isn't just about what happens on camera. It's about how much of yourself you're willing to sacrifice for fame and opportunity. Sweet Tea had joined the show hoping for a fresh start alongside her husband. Instead, she found herself at the center of manufactured drama, betrayed by those she thought were friends, and manipulated by producers more interested in ratings than in her well-being. Her position had evolved dramatically since her first appearance. No longer the naive newcomer seeking acceptance, she had become the primary target of group hostility. Even Dr.Mimi, once her apparent ally, had revealed her true colors by aligning with the established cast members. Trust, once broken, seemed impossible to rebuild. This left viewers debating what Sweet Tea should do next. Some argued she should leave the show for her own mental health, suggesting that the toxic environment would only continue causing her pain. Reality TV can be psychologically damaging, and staying might mean subjecting herself to more of the same treatment. Others believed Sweet Tea should stay and fight. These supporters saw her as someone who refused to be silenced or pushed aside. They wanted her to return stronger than ever, armed with the knowledge of how the game really worked and ready to face those who had tried to break her spirit. What made Sweet Tea's story resonate with so many was her refusal to let the show define her. Whether discussing the fake friendships or producer manipulation, she consistently maintained her authenticity. She wasn't just speaking out for herself, but for anyone who had ever felt misrepresented or pushed aside. Her journey became symbolic of something larger than reality TV drama. The biggest question remained: could Sweet Tea ever trust anyone on the show again? The experience had revealed the true nature of her relationships with the cast. Everyone seemed to be playing angles, forming alliances, and doing whatever necessary to maintain their position. Finding even one genuine connection seemed unlikely. Despite everything, Sweet Tea refused to be defeated. She understood now that the situation was less about friendship and more about survival in a cutthroat environment. Yet she wouldn't take the easy way out or play by their rules. She was determined to define her own path forward, whether that meant staying on her own terms or walking away with her dignity intact. If Sweet Tea chose to leave, the show would certainly feel her absence. She had become one of the most discussed cast members, driving conversations and engagement. Would the remaining women finally find the peace they claimed to want? Or would the dynamic fall apart without her as the common adversary? Conversely, if she stayed, the tension would likely intensify. Sweet Tea would return stronger, more aware, and ready to confront those who had tried to break her. A new chapter would begin, not just for the show, but for Sweet Tea herself. Regardless of her decision, Sweet Tea had already made her mark. She had transcended being just another reality TV personality to become a symbol of resilience. Through lies, betrayal, and heartbreak, she refused to be silenced or manipulated. Her voice remained strong, her determination unwavering. Sweet Tea's journey is far from over. Whether she continues on Married to Medicine or pursues new opportunities, her story represents something powerful. The strength to stand in your truth, even when everyone is trying to rewrite it. Whatever comes next, one thing is certain. Sweet Tea has only just begun to tell her story.